So like you said, I'm Stacy Johnson, and I'm really actually honored and excited to be here. I'm really excited that you guys get to do a class like this. I think it's so important, some of the stuff that y'all are learning. But I wanted to tell you guys first a little bit about my story so you could kind of understand where some of my advice is coming from and why I have collected some of these little pieces of advice along the way and think that they'll be really super helpful for you guys. So I actually grew up in foster care. I went into foster care when I was 2 years old. My mom was an alcoholic, and my grandma called CPS, and I ended up going into foster care when I was 2. And by the time I was 15, I had been in 10 different placements, and I had asked my social worker if I could just go to a group home, because I just felt like things kept happening where I would go to a home and then I would be there and then something would happen and I couldn't be there anymore. And it was really hard on me emotionally, and I just asked my social worker, like, hey, can I go to like a group home where there's staff, you know? And I figured if I did my chores and I followed the rules, then maybe I could just stay there without having to leave. And so my social worker said, I was 15 years old at the time, and that's me if you guys haven't guessed. This is my biological mom, Carol, and this is me when I was 15. And I asked when my caseworker, when I asked her that, she said, you know, I don't think that's a really good idea, Stace. There's a lot of rules in a group home, and you're not really going to be like a normal kid. And, you know, some of the kids there are kind of rough, you know? And I said, yeah, but if I do my chores and I follow the rules, then I could just stay there, right? And she says, well, yeah. So she let me go into Lisa Lane group home when I was 15. And it was kind of like a house. It was a regular house with 6 girls that lived in it and a staff member there at all times, a couple staff member. And I ended up telling the house therapist there that I wanted to get legally emancipated by the time I was 16, because I felt like I could take care of myself, right? I think that a lot of times when we're in difficult situations and we're, you know, in CPS and we're in places and we don't feel cared about, it's like, well, shoot, I can take care of myself, you know? So I told this therapist that I wanted to be on my own and get emancipated. And instead of kind of laughing me out of his office, because when you're 15, it's kind of tough to be on your own. Honestly, sometimes it's hard to get a job when you're 15. You know, you have to have access to resources and be able to, you know, get what you need to live your life. And so, but instead of laughing me out of his office, he said, you know what? You're a little bit rough around the edges, but you can do it. You're going to have to get right to work. And he bought me this book. I don't know if any of y'all guys have seen this book or heard of this book. Has anyone seen this book or heard of this book? It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. Well, that therapist, you've seen it before? Yeah. Have you ever read it? No? So this therapist gave me this book, and it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, and it talks about some different habits that successful teenagers put into place. And so I read this book like it was the Bible. I mean, I wanted to do everything this book told me to, because he told me that if I did what I needed to do and I got a job and I saved my money and I did what I needed to do, that I would probably be able to get emancipated by a judge if I could prove to him that I could be on my own. And so I worked really hard. I got a job. I was 15 years old. I got a job at a convalescent hospital, and started working and saving my money, and I got letters of recommendation from different people. I did really well in school. I did my studies, and I started to get more privileges at the group home because, you know, I was moving up in my level and these things. And so little by little, I chipped away at my goal, and little by little, I got there. And when I was 16 years old, I went before a judge, and he granted my emancipation. And so I was on my own at 16 years old. So less than a year after that picture was taken, I was on my own in my own apartment and trying to live my life as a 16-year-old in the world with no one to help me. So it was definitely a scary, scary process. I'm not gonna lie to y'all and tell you it was easy and fun and I had my own apartment, I could do whatever I want, it was a good old time. It was hard, and I had to work hard, and I had to scrimp by, and there was times when I didn't have enough money for toilet paper, you know, and it was, yeah, that's a tough thing not to have when you need it, right? So, I mean, you know, it was a struggle, but I worked really hard, and I followed these principles, these 7 habits of highly effective teens, and I followed this because being in CPS and being in 10 different placements by the time I was 15, I don't feel like I really got a lot of information on how to live my life. I don't feel like I got a lot of information on what to do and how to live and how to act. In fact, it was very confusing sometimes, because when you're in 10 different homes with 10 different rules and 10 different cultures and 10 different holidays and all the different religions. I mean, I think I had been 5 different religions by the time I was 15. But yeah, so it's a lot to change and to do and to deal with. You know, and so when that therapist gave me this book, it gave me something to live by. It gave me things, you know, like the first habit is be proactive instead of reactive. So do you guys know what that means? It means taking responsibility for your own actions, knowing that you're responsible for your own actions, and instead of reacting or having, you know, a negative reaction to what's going on, you do something positive that can help solve the problem. So today, they asked me to talk about the legal nuts and bolts side of the business. And I think one of the reasons that they picked me to talk about it is because despite the fact that I was in foster care and I had a tough life and I had a lot of parents that seemingly didn't, you know, care or want to help, you know, that I had something that I could live by and look back towards. So, basically, when I got emancipated when I was 16, I decided that someday I wanted to help foster kids the way that that therapist helped me. And so I decided that I was going to open a shelter for foster kids. And I thought, well, if I can help kids and I can, you know, show them, you know, some principles about living, and I can help them in their daily life, then maybe they can be successful like I ended up being successful. Because after I got emancipated, I finished school and I got a job and I worked my way up in the financial industry. I had my own insurance and financial business for 8 years, and I was very successful. And so when I moved to Texas and decided to open the shelter, and some people encouraged me to do that, I ended up opening Central Texas Table of Grace, an emergency shelter for foster kids, about a year after I decided that I was going to do that. So I've been in business for 8 years. I had my own insurance and financial practice, and then I opened my own nonprofit from scratch from day one in 1 year. And so now Table of Grace has been open for about 5 years. And they actually, last year I was featured on the cover of Austin Women Magazine for opening. Guys, do we need to do something with the candy? Maybe I shouldn't have brought the candy. So anyway, I ended up being on the cover of Austin Women Magazine. It was her candy. I ended up being on the cover of Austin Women Magazine because of opening the shelter for Table of Grace. And so what that did was that gave the shelter a lot of exposure, and a lot of people heard about us and what we were doing. And so that brought donors to us and more help, and we were able to do more and more things in order to help kids in foster care. So what I decided I was going to talk about when I talk about the legal nuts and bolts of having a business are some very, very basic ideas that you can follow and understand in order to help you avoid any pitfalls in business, okay? So I have 5 simple principles for you guys to follow and think about. When you open a business, I think that you guys are going to talk about today, you know, being incorporated versus being, you know, a C Corp versus an S Corp, the different kind of businesses you can apply for. But one of the very first things that you guys need to think about when you're opening or developing your own business is getting the proper advice and the proper paperwork done. So when you open a business, you have to get incorporated, you have to do some things with the IRS, there's some different things that you have to do, and all that takes some skill to do it. So I recommend that when you're doing important paperwork like that, that at the very least, if you can't afford to get a lawyer's advice or someone to help do that paperwork that does it all the time, for you to at least get the advice of someone that you know that's a mentor in business or someone that knows about those different kinds of things. Because I may not be a lawyer, but I know a lot about incorporating a business. So you might have, obviously this class, you guys have a lot of resources and people that you could go to that maybe they're not a lawyer, maybe they're not, you know, qualified to write contracts, but they would at least be able to take a look at something for you and make sure that it's done the proper way and give you the right advice. Because when you do something wrong in the beginning of a business, forming a business or doing something in the very beginning, it can become a huge problem later on and really hard to reverse, because once you've named your business or once you've, you know, put something out there and then you have to change it because you did something wrong, it can really, really affect your business and your profits and everything else. The second thing that I like to talk about is to not believe everything you hear. So in business, you're gonna have to make phone calls to figure out about a bill or figure out how to do something or make a call to customer service about your phone bill or something like that. And a lot of times people on the other end of the phone don't like to say, I don't know. And they don't like to appear that they don't know. So sometimes people, even professional people on the phone, will tell you something that they don't really know for sure is true. They're just trying to, get the job done and say, whatever they need to say to get through with the phone call. And they might not be giving you the right advice. So anytime that you're talking to someone like customer service or a bill or, something that you're having to deal with, and you're not really sure about that answer, or it has a lot of consequences, whatever that answer may be, it's a really great idea to get a second opinion, maybe go to a supervisor if it's a customer service. But with that, if you're gonna second guess, someone on the phone or, a bill or a company that you're working with or something like that, you wanna always be polite and kind. You never want to be on the phone with customer service and use bad language or be mean to them or say, you know what, you better figure this out or else, because things like that, when you're not kind, you're not gonna get what you want. Because at the end of the day, the person on the other line is just a person too, just like you and me. And when someone's mean to you, do you feel like being nice back to them? Do you feel like helping them when someone's mean and angry with you and accusing you of things? You don't really wanna be nice back to them, right? So it goes the same way when you're trying to get something done in your business, whether you're talking to an upset client or you're talking to customer service or you're talking to someone on the phone, you really just want to make sure that you're kind and professional at all times. Also keep in mind, these days, you guys are being recorded with everything you do. Almost every customer service call, almost every type of interaction that you have is a lot of times in this day and age being recorded. So sometimes when you have that bad day and you go off the chain at someone on the phone, and that's there. It's recorded, it's there, and someone can go back to that later and it can be seen what actually happened. So you guys want to always be nice and kind and honest when you're dealing with any type of business dealing. The third thing is always following deadlines and rules, especially when it comes to state agencies or, licensing processes, or if you're licensed for something or you have a certain designation or you have to go through those things. The deadlines and rules and the IRS, usually deadlines and rules in the grown-up world have really big consequences. So if you're late on something, there's a fine. If if you don't file the right paperwork, there might be a fine. And in the grown-up world, some of those things can actually lead to jail time if you do things wrong. Because if they can't figure out whether you were doing something wrong on purpose or you just didn't know or you just didn't file something right or you just didn't do something wrong and they can't tell, you can have really negative, even legal consequences for that as well. So always follow the deadlines and rules and things like that with applications. Always pay things on time, because again, if you forget to pay something, if you don't follow the rule, you can have negative consequences on that. My number 4 thing is watch what you say. This day and age, this may seem really, really obvious, but this day and age in social media and when you're trying to get a job or open a business or start something, what's the first thing they're gonna look at? Social media, right? They're gonna scope you out a little bit for any type of job, or if you're a business owner yourself, they're gonna check you out and see who you are and see if you're an honest person, see if you have an online presence, see if you have anything that they should be concerned about. And so remember, whatever y'all post online is there, even if you delete it, because people can screenshot it, it can be there. And so I wanted to give you guys a couple real life examples of things that happen. And these are tweets, and I know you guys are probably more on Instagram, right? You guys are probably more of an Instagram. So these are more people that got fired because of tweets, but it's all the same, right? Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But I picked out 3 different things and 3 different kind of things that you should really, really stay away from on social media. So this girl, she had a job offer from Cisco, and she tweeted, "Cisco just offered me a job. Now I have to weigh the utility of a fatty paycheck against the daily commute to San Jose and hating the work." So she posted that on Twitter after getting hired for that job, and guess who saw it? Yes, exactly. So do you think she had that job anymore? No. So this one was this was a person who, the other thing that you should never ever talk about on social media are really controversial topics, especially if you're going to be a business owner or someone prominent in the community, or again, even if you're just trying to get a job. If you're constantly putting your personal opinions out there, especially if they're very controversial, then you're going to have issues too. So this guy, he's a Toronto-based sportscaster. So he's a sportscaster. He's been on TV. He knows what he's doing, right? So he was fired because he tweeted his opinion on same-sex marriage. He actually said, "I completely and wholeheartedly support Todd Reynolds in his support for the traditional," and he capitalized true, meaning of marriage. He's fired. Of course he is, because you don't post stuff like that, right? You don't post stuff like that, even if that's your opinion. Is that kind to other people? Is that something that you should put out there on your opinion on those hot topics? No. So he was fired. The third one that I have, again, anything sexual can be really, really, really get you in hot water, both legally and with jobs, with people, getting the lawsuit personally. This guy, he was a law fellow at New York University, a law fellow. He's a lawyer at New York University until he tweeted some astonishing remarks about sexual assault. He said, where Laura Logan had to outdo Anderson, where was her buddy McChrystal? He was soon apologizing profusely and resigned from his fellowship the next day. So these are grown-ups that are seemingly smart and, experienced and, working out there within the world, but yet they still did these things. And so it seems like it's so obvious, but it's just something that I want to drive home more and more, because do you know how many of my kids from the shelter that I'm friends on Facebook with once they left? A lot of them, probably 50% of them. And sometimes I cry. I'm not kidding you. Sometimes I cry when I see what they're posting on Facebook, because it's things that are just going to haunt them and follow them forever, for the rest of their lives. Taking a bong hit off a 3-foot bong on Facebook is not a smart idea. That's just not what you do. Tweeting about or posting about any kind of drugs or sexual activity or anything like that. It seems very obvious, but look at these 3 grown-ups who did that very thing and had very, very serious consequences for their life. Okay, and my last bullet point that I think is really, really important, I call it keep it clean. When we're talking about nuts and bolts and the legalities of being in business, you want to keep it clean, and I'm talking about your record. And I'm talking about your life, your personal life, okay? Because when you're in business, something that you do in your personal life can sink your whole business in one day. Furthermore, if you're developing any type of a criminal record, especially after the age of 18, that could affect you for the rest of your life. In fact, when I was young and I was in foster care, I had a couple near brushes with the law and things like that. Luckily, nothing ever ended up on my record. But looking back on it now, opening the shelter and looking at what those record requirements were, if I was convicted of any of those offenses that I was possibly close to getting convicted of when I was young, I would not have been able to open the shelter. So I wouldn't even be standing here talking to you guys today. One little tiny mistake that I made when I was 18 years old could have affected me forever. Oh, are you raising your hand? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't tell you were raising your hand. So yeah, just one little tiny thing could affect you for just the rest of your life. It doesn't matter that you decided to go the other way or that you're better now or that you've done whatever. Sometimes there are certain things that just don't and won't go away. So keep it clean on your record, keep it clean in your life. Again, when you're posting things on social media and things like that, you want to think about what you're posting and what you're making yourself look like as a person, because that will be looked at as business owners. In fact, a lot of careers have been sunk in recent days just from simply posting something about, just a one sentence thing about their life or their opinion or something like that. So, you want to operate with integrity at all times and keep it clean, because you will be found out if you're doing shady stuff. It just happens. So in business, if you're, cheating a little bit on that form, or you're, you forgot to get a signature, so you think it'll be okay to just, go ahead and put that because they would have signed it anyway, or, doing things like this, these little tiny things, they'll get you busted big time in life. even these movie stars now. And did you guys hear about the movie stars doing the college admissions scandal and them getting their kids into college on fake reports and fake things? These are smart, grown-up people that have educations and understand what's right and wrong, and they made those mistakes, and it's going to affect them really for the rest of their lives now. That's just on them now for the rest of their lives. So I just wanted to give you guys a couple of high-level tips. The 5 tips that we went over, again, were your paperwork and your advice when you're starting your business, making sure that you have the right advice. The second one was don't believe everything you hear. Always get second opinions and make sure the information is valid. Make sure you're always following deadlines and rules, especially when it comes to legal entities. Watch what you say on Facebook. And then lastly, keep it clean. So if you guys have any questions, I'm sure we have a couple minutes if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, thank you guys for having me, and I was really honored to be here. Thanks. Oh, and also raise your hand if you want one of these books. I brought one for everyone, but only if you're going to read it and take it, I'm going to give it to you, okay? You want one? Okay, keep your hand up so I can go around. And if everyone who wants them, they can have them, but I just don't like to waste them if someone